day-to-day consumer type percentage situations. You understand how they work. You know what to look for. Okay, get rid of all this stuff. There's that. Pointer options, pen. Any particular color you want today? There are the colors. Blue? Bright blue or dark blue? There we go. All right, so we're set up. Want to talk today about sales prices, how percentages work with sales, how percentages work in some other scenarios as well. We've already talked about the idea of relative change versus absolute change. Okay. Talked about how do you compute a percentage. It's the new price minus the original price divided by the original price. And what you have to be careful of is, depending on how the problem is stated, the original price can change. Remember the example with the salary in South Dakota versus New York. Okay? When you say compared to and then list something, that is always the original. Okay, so be really careful. It's easy to get the numbers backwards and everything is messed up after that. Okay, so we talked about the three ways of using percentages. Okay, as fractions, to describe change, and for comparison. Ooh, if I was to do a list of things, remember on the last quiz, list the 4 stages for problem solving? Okay. Hey, look at there. If I was looking for a question with a list, wow, think that might be an interesting list? Just a thought. Think it out loud here. Okay. Then we started looking at how do you compute percentages, absolute change, relative change. We talked about the fact that it is possible for a percentage to be negative, didn't we? It's entirely possible to have a negative percentage. That means things are going down. There's the average salary. Okay. Where we stopped was right around here. You can have 2 different types of problems in comparing. You can say the percent is some percent more than, which means that if it's some percent, for example, salary. Okay, they hire Nicole in, and Nicole gets 7% more than I get. Go get her. Okay? That means she's going to get the salary I get plus a little extra, isn't she? And the way that you figure that out is you take 100 plus whatever the extra is that Nicole gets as a percent. So if she gets 7% more, she receives all of what I receive, plus she receives another 7 over what I receive, which would mean that her salary is 107% of my salary. Does that make sense? You can convert this back to a decimal. It'd be 1.07. Make sense? How to convert it back? And remember, whenever you're actually going to do mathematics, you really do want to convert back to a decimal, not a percent. Things will be 100 times bigger than what they should be, or 100 times smaller than what they should be. And if we knew that my salary was $45,000, what's Nicole getting? 107% of that. So it's going to be this times 1.07. Which you could then whip out your calculator and do 1.07 times 45,000 equals, she's making 48,150. So she's making an extra $3,150 than I am, isn't she? Does that make sense on how to do more than? The other way to look at things is less than. We could start this out with, hey, Nicole is making $48,150. Now, here's where some people will mess up. They'll say Chuck is making 7% less than Nicole is because she's making 7% more than Chuck is. It doesn't work to give the same percentage each direction. Really? Honest? Let's try it. Is everybody okay? And the catch is you've got a different point of origin. Before we were starting at 45,000, now we're starting at 48,000. So if we were to try that same maneuver here, with it being less than, it would now be the 100 minus 7, which would give 93%, which is a decimal is going to be 0.93. Okay. And what's going to happen is this is going to compute my salary to be $44,790 or $779, which is actually lower than what it is. How does it turn out lower if I use the same 7%?
Because
You're using, yeah. And we're taking 7% of 48,000, aren't we? Thank you. Well, we would have to tweak this a little bit differently. Okay? The point here, and we'll talk about this more as we go on, is if something is 7% more than the other is not 7% less. And the reason is when we start with Nicole's salary, $48,150. When you take 7% of that, is 7% of 48,000 bigger or smaller than 7% of 45,000? It's bigger, isn't it? So if we each got a 7% raise, Nicole's raise would be bigger than mine, wouldn't it? Okay. So what we need to do then is if we want to figure out what percent less than Nicole I make, we would have to take the 48,150, multiply it by some number, and we want that to work out to be 45,000, don't we? Does that make sense to everybody? Which means that X is going to be the 45,000 over the 48,150. Aha. So let's see here. I'll press clear. 45,000 divided by 48,150 equals. This is 0.93. Let's say 5, rounding it off to 3 places. Well, that's pretty close to the 0.93, isn't it? But it's a smidge bit more. Now, one of the questions you could ask is, okay, so what percent less do I make? Well, we're going to have the 100 minus whatever that percent is going to equal to 93.5. Does that make sense what I'm doing? Are you okay? I don't want you sitting there just shaking your head yes, thinking, I hope this goes away. It will in a couple of weeks. Okay. Till the final. And it'll come up again. So I want to make sure that this makes sense. And in the real world, it's going to keep coming up the rest of your life. Crud. What's P going to be equal to? Well, the negative of P is going to be a negative 6.5, which means P is about 6.5%. So I make about 6.5% less than Nicole. Notice the percent less is a slightly smaller number because we're taking the percentage of a larger starting value. Whoa, that's kind of weird. They're kind of close, but they're not the same. And this can start to make a big difference, hundreds and thousands of dollars difference. Yeah.
Okay, so in the first problem you were saying like the amount of money that she makes.
Right, how much more than me she makes.
Yeah. But in the second problem you're finding out the percentage.
We're finding out how much I make. Ultimately, we want to know how much do I make. If we were told that Nicole makes $48,150.
But how would you do that without the 45,000?
Yeah, well, what actually winds up being the case is somebody could correctly say Chuck makes 6.5% less than Nicole. We had to do these computations to get the 6.5%. Okay? And what this does is knowing the 45,000 allows us to figure out how much less Chuck makes than Nicole. Now, we've played that game. What we could also do is we could say, okay, Nicole makes $48,150. Chuck makes 6.5% less than Nicole. And if you think, gosh, I wonder what Chuck makes. You would take the $48,150. I'm going to have to move up to the top here. $48,150. Multiply it times the 100 minus the 6.5. And remember, this is a percent. So this is going to give you the 48,150 times. This is going to be 93.5%. And should we really multiply by a percent, or do we need to convert it back to a decimal? Convert it back to a decimal. And when I convert it back to the decimal, I'll put the 48,150 times 0.935 equals. If you do that, what you wind up with then is $45,020.25. It's off a little bit. Why is it off a little bit? That's right, I rounded. Remember in the lower right hand corner there where we got the 0.953? And I said, let's call it 0.953. It was really, sorry, 0.935. It was really 0.9347 something or other. 457? Okay, thank you. She's on it. Yeah. Okay? And we rounded it, and we rounded it to a slightly bigger number, didn't we? Which is where this extra $20 comes from, is by rounding it up slightly. If we would have rounded it down slightly, I would have been making a little less than 45,000, wouldn't I? This whole issue of where you start from when you compute the next percentage is extremely important. Okay? It'll change things. We've already talked about that. Okay. We'll get to that example in a minute. Okay. Aha. A store is having a 25% off sale. How does a sales item price compare to its original price? Well, 25% off means what? Cheaper, right? Less than. It's 25% less than the original amount, isn't it? Which means that we would do the 100% minus the 25% they are dropping the price. Which now gives you 75%. So if something originally sold for, let's say, $27.50, this is the original price, how would you get the sale price? There are two ways to get the sale price. One is to take the $27.50 times 0.25. Now, is times 0.25 going to give you the price you pay or the amount they're taking off? the amount they're taking off. So that's going to be about $6.50, I'm guessing. So then you would have to come back and take the $27.50 minus that amount, and that'll give you the new price. The second way is to first subtract off the sale, which is what this 100 minus the 25 is doing. If they're taking off 25%, you are still paying 75% of it, aren't you? So what you could do is take this 2750 times the 0.75. Okay, 2750 times 0.75 equals, looks like the sale price is going to be $20.63.
Isn't that the same amount of steps either way?
It's the same amount of steps. The difference is how hard are the steps. In the first case, you take 0.25 times 2750. Can you do that in your head? No. Okay, well you might be able to divide by 4 because 25% is a fourth. Now you've got this other number, and now you take 2750 minus this other number. So the subtraction's a little on the messy side as well, isn't it? So you got two messy steps if you do it that way. And you're absolutely right, you can do it that way. The other route to take involves two steps. The difference is one of the steps is pretty easy and the other is going to be messy. So one way, two messy steps, the other way, an easy step and a messy step. Well, wait a minute, Chuck, what's the easy step if you do it the second way? The 100% minus the 25% discount tells you you're really paying what? 75%. Can you do that in your head? Probably. So you just take the sale price times 0.75. And boom, you're there.
You take the original price.
Right, because that's what's being discounted.
Oh, you use the sale price.
Right. I'm sorry. You take the original price times the 0.75 and it'll give you the sale price. Okay? Is everybody good with that? Either way will get you there. This route that I'm showing you here involves the subtraction. It's probably something you can do in your head. So on the calculator, you just whip out, you put in the original price times 0.75, which you did in your head, and you're done. You don't have to be carrying extra numbers down and subtracting and stuff like that. Either way will work. Which way is the right way? Either way. Okay? Either way is the right way. Just that one might be a little quicker for you. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, you've got to be careful because there are two phrases out there that sound very similar. One of them is talking about percentages. That's what we've been talking about here. A second thing is percentage points. Percentage points are different from a percentage. Let's take a look. Okay. A bank increases the interest rate from 3% to 4%. The percentage points talks about how many percent did it increase. It went from 3% to 4%. It went up 1 percentage point. It did not go up 1%. It actually went up 33%. Now this really plays weird in some people's minds because you could correctly say the interest rate in the bank went up by 33% from 3% to 4%. Or the interest rate went from 3% to 4%. This is a 33% increase. That sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? It only went from 3 to 4. How can that be 33%? What the 33% is looking at is the relative change. It's looking at where did it start, where did it end, and then percentage-wise, how big of an increase was this? The percentage points is it went from 3% to 4%, a 1 percentage point increase. I know I've said it before. Okay, it's not that I've forgotten where I am. What I'm concerned about is you differentiating between a percentage point and a percentage. It's that heavy pen, right? Let's see. What's this doing? Where are we? Ah, garbage. I think I got one out. Okay, I got a slide out of place here somewhere. Okay. Let's take a look at something. Let's make up something here. Let's say that you have an investment. Bless you. Last quarter, it was earning 7%. This quarter, it's earning 11%. So let's say that this was quarter 2, and this is quarter 3. Was it an increase or a decrease in the percentage yield? It's an increase. Okay? The return increased by 4 percentage points. Does that make sense? It went from 7% to 11%. Everybody good with that? The percent increase is going to be whatever the new value is minus the original value divided by the original value. Is that formula starting to get familiar? Okay, which is going to be 4 over 7. And if we take, thank you, it's going to be 0.571, and I just rounded it off there, which gives us a 57.1% increase in return. Do you see the difference between percentage points and percentage? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's why I'm saying this time and time again and going slowly through this, because it seems like we're nitpicking, but this is the kind of stuff you're going to run into in banks, in investments, mortgages, all kinds of stuff like that. Okay? It happens in a variety of places, and I'm going to make up another one here. Okay? Based off of a report that I heard on the radio yesterday. This was kind of interesting. Okay? You've probably never heard of these. Probably never seen one. I hope you've never used one. Also known as vaping, right? Okay? Was listening to a program on the radio while I was driving yesterday, and they were interviewing a dentist. She's been in practice for 25 years. And she said, it's been really weird. The last 5 or 6 years, I am seeing teenagers in early 20s coming in with weird gum diseases, weird tongue diseases, weird stuff growing on their cheeks, that I've never seen at any point before in my career. Been around 25 years, the first 20 years or so, not so much, actually never. The last 5 years, and she said it's kind of interesting. Sometimes people won't even admit to it, and she'll ask the patient, do you vape? And they'll say things like, I don't own one. Of course, she's a mom and she knows that's not the answer. That's being evasive, isn't it? And she said, I'll just tell them, I didn't ask if you own one. I said, do you vape? And what's happening is there are diseases coming out. This year alone, there have been over 100 people die from traumatic respiratory failure that they can't even diagnose yet. I mean, they've never seen this stuff before, so they don't even have the tests to figure out what it is, let alone treat it. It's untreatable. They can't figure out what it is. The person just dies. Kinds of weird cancers and stuff now coming up in the mouth that they've never seen before. And it's all from this vaping stuff. And she actually made the comment, she said, to tell you the truth, in some ways I wish they just smoked. Because at least we know how to deal with lung cancer. We can diagnose lung cancer. Everybody knows that you're doing something bad to yourself with cigarettes, and they think that vaping's okay. It's not. And, as she pointed out, because it's the new kid on the block, nobody in the medical field knows how to treat it or even look for it. And people just die because they don't know how to diagnose it or treat it. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. The numbers, I'm not sure exactly what they are. So these numbers I'm going to make up. But the point of it is to show you how percentages can get kind of interesting. Okay, vaping among teenagers has increased by, I'm making this number up, 21% from 18% to the current rate. Now, I left out the new percentage because we got to compute it. In a newspaper report or a news report or something like that, hopefully they would tell you what the new percentage is. And you heard me say, it's because I need to still compute that. If it's increased by 21%, and she made a comment, she said, it's really kind of weird because I've had patients, I've diagnosed them with cancer of the tongue, and it's really kind of weird to see them coming in the next time with half a tongue. And it doesn't grow back, folks. That's it for the rest of your life. Yeah, that's kind of freaky. Okay, so how are we going to figure out what the new percentage is? Adam? We're just experimenting. We're trying stuff on. If it fits, great. If it doesn't fit, we'll just hang it back up and move on. Right. So what's the original percentage? Yeah, well, what's going on here? What's the original percentage? What's the start point? 18. Good. So let's pick this apart. The original percentage is our 18%. How much has it increased? Or let me rephrase it. What's the 21? It's the amount it's grown, isn't it? Now, when you're computing a percent increase or a percent decrease, do you add or multiply? Let's see. When you're computing a percent increase or decrease, what did we do there? Oh, we multiplied. Okay. You're used to seeing it in that point, or that setup. What we're going to do is take our original percentage, multiply it by the amount of of increase. Well, wait a minute. If I multiply it by the 0.21, that's going to give me about, I don't want that. It's going to give me about 3.6. Does that mean it's increased from 18% to 3.6%? Is that an increase? No, it's 21% more than it was before, isn't it? So what am I going to multiply by? Well, I'm going to multiply by the 100 plus, how much has it gone up? 21. But remember, I want to take this 18 times some number, and can I use this number like it is, or do I have to convert it to a decimal? Convert it to a decimal, so it's going to be 1.21. And in case you were saying you add, we do add. It's just kind of buried. Where do we add in this problem? The 100 plus the 21, don't we? Ah, it is in there. It's just not up front on center stage. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take whatever our original value was, and we're going to multiply it by 1.21 equals, which is going to be 21.78, which is really 21.8%. Now this can sound kind of strange on a news report, but if the person, the reporter, gets the numbers right, you know what they would say? Vaping among teenagers has increased by 21% from 18% to 22%. Some of you are looking at me like, I just got hit by a bus. And I didn't even hear it coming. Okay? You've got 3 percentages there. Let's pick this apart in slow motion. Has increased by 21%. Does that talk about the total number of people, the starting number of people, or the change in the number of people? This is the change. This is kind of like the sale, 25% off. It tells you how much stuff changes. So the 21% is talking about the change. Has increased by 21% from 18%. What's the 18%? Starting point, isn't it? Last year it was 18% of teenagers. To a current rate of, we can fill that in now, 22%. It has gone from 18 to 22. And a lot of people are going to look at that and say, dude, that's only a change of 4, isn't it? That's not a change of 21. That's a change of 4. Here's where this percentage point thing comes in. It is a 4 percentage point change. From 18 to 22 is a 4 percentage point change. Does that make sense? Yeah. But the actual percent of increase, it's a different phrase. It sounds kind of the same. The actual percent of increase is 21%. Yeah.
So for the first problem, do you know is that because it says percentage points?
Okay, the return increased by 4 percentage points because it went from 7 to 11. If you take the one percentage minus the other, you're talking about a percentage point change. Okay, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Well, like when you look at word counts, how are you going to know the difference?
How are you going to know the difference? Okay, if you're asked compute the percentage point change, bingo, you take the one minus the other. If you're asked for a percent change, not percentage point, but a percent change, that's where you do the new minus the original divided by the original. Or, in the case of the second problem with the vaping, increased by 21%. That's not percentage point. That's a percentage problem. So it's 21% more than it used to be. Oh, wait a minute. That's the stuff we worked with at the end of last class and right here at the beginning of this one. Do you see why people can get this messed up? Reporters get this stuff messed up. Not necessarily because they're trying to be mean and malicious. It's just because, you know what? This is a little bit on the picky side, isn't it? Or in the Midwest, corn fusing. Okay? They don't necessarily have to have any ill intent. There's plenty of confusion just going on. It's bad. There's plenty of confusion just going on with holy mackerel, percentage versus percentage point. If you get home and you're thinking, geez, what was that again? Go about 20 minutes into the movie. Okay. What movie? Yeah, what movie should you go into? This one. Where's it going to be? On YouTube. Well, how do you get the link to find where it is? Blackboard. You go to the notes for September 11th. Okay. Yeah.
So when you said the actual percent increase, you said it's 21, but you wrote the current rate is 22.
That's right.
Does it matter if you put like 21.8 or 22?
The reason I put 22 is because everything else was just in whole numbers.
Would you like say round to the nearest whole number?
Yeah, since everything else is to the nearest whole number, that's fine. I'm not going to get real mad over something flew by. I'm not going to get real mad about 21.8 versus 22. Okay, yeah. Okay.
There will be a flag raising ceremony on the Blue Ash campus at 10 o'clock this morning in honor of Patriot Day. This ceremony will include a 21-gun salute, so please do not be alarmed by the
Okay, so it's 10 o'clock or 10:10 or whenever.
flag raising ceremony on the Blue Ash campus at 10 o'clock this morning in honor of Patriot Day. The ceremony will include a 21-gun salute, so please do not be alarmed by the sound of gunfire on our campus during this event. Thank you.
That'll be cool. Wonder if it's going to be the police or some of the ROTC folks or. Okay. So is this starting to make some sense? This is something you're going to have to work with some. This is something that you're going to have to dig into the homework. And if you do the 3 or 4 problems that are on my math lab, and it still doesn't make sense, where can you go to get more of them? The book. The book may be blue covered now, but it's still 3A. Yeah.
So like in the second problem, would you like say on a paper test, find the current rate? Because I
Right.
think that's why it's kind of confusing.
Yes.
There's not a question there.
Right.
You know?
Well, what I was saying there is you would hear a presentation like this. This is what would be said, okay, on the radio program. And what confuses people is you got 21%, 18%, 22%, all this stuff floating around, and too many percentages. And some people are going to say that's not a 21% increase. It only goes from 18 to 22. How can that be a 21% increase?
No, I get that. But like,
Okay, great. Yeah. Now, what I could ask you then is it increased by 21% from 18% to, and then ask you, find the current rate.
Okay, that's
And it's 21% more than. What you need to do is read in there, oh, this is a more than problem. And being a more than problem means I'm going to use this super cool 100 plus to 21, and I'm off and running. Does that make sense? This takes some doodling with. It feels kind of strange. There is a massive difference between percentage point and percentage. Okay. It's one of the things that drives my wife nuts. Because in mathematics, there's a massive difference between one word and another. free and easy going hits with precision, and it's not a good thing. It forces both of us to grow, which is a good thing, I guess. We just have to remember it's a good thing that we're growing and not killing each other. Okay, we don't fight over money, but you purchase a shirt with a labeled pre-tax price of $21. The local sales tax is 6%. What is your final price, including tax? Oh, you're never going to have anything like this in the real world, are you? Bless you. How would you figure out the final price? That's right. It's 106%. It's 6% more than the original price, isn't it? So all you got to do is whip out your phone, take 21 that you know you're going to pay, and multiply by 106. Okay, let's try it. 21 times 106 equals. Wow, this shirt's going to cost you $2,226. Please don't tell me that Friday. Think about that. I'm glad you're laughing because you know there's something wrong with that answer, don't you? Okay, continue to know that Friday. We're going to multiply by 1.06. And what that will give you is 21 times 1.06 equals. Does this sound a more reasonable price for the shirt? Does that sound more reasonable? We're not buying Tommy Bahama or something like that. Louis Vuitton. Okay. We're not paying $2,200 for a shirt. Are you good? That one making sense? Skip through all this stuff. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of, and remember earlier when we were talking about Nicole and my salary, and it said if she's making 7% more than I am, I'm only making 6.3% less than she is. And you're there, really? Dude, it should be 7% each way. No, it depends on where you start. If she's making 7% more, we're starting with my salary, aren't we? So we need a larger percentage of my salary to get up to her salary. If we're starting with her salary, it's going to take a smaller percent of a bigger number to move down the same amount. Does that make sense? So it depends on where you start. Okay? For example, this is a classic. Okay? It's not really a problem now. Under the previous administration, this was happening routinely. They were cutting people's salaries. And people were staying. Why were they staying? They came up and said, Nicole, we got to cut your salary 10%. Is Nicole happy? Yes! She's not happy, but why wasn't she moving then? There weren't any jobs. Okay? I had kind of a long ride yesterday, so one of the things they made comment of, you know, the unemployment rates, is it better or worse than it was under the previous administration? Way better. Yeah, but does that work for minority groups too? The minority groups are actually killing it. Okay? If you look at three of the big, four of them. Let's go with African American, Asian, Latino, and women. I don't know why they call women a minority group because there are more women than there are men. Okay? All four groups had the lowest unemployment rate ever in the history of this nation this month. It was the lowest ever 2 or 3 months ago, and now it's even lower than the lowest. It is way down there. And one of the other things that they made comment of, there have been, I don't want to get the wrong numbers, I'm thinking it was around 6 million new jobs created under the current administration. What percentage of those do you think went to minority groups?
A lot.
A lot, 80%.
I think I read something like this is the lowest minority unemployment rate.
Yeah, it's It's the lowest ever in this country's entire history. The lowest ever. That means it's the highest employment rate. Oh, teenagers looking for jobs in the summer? Lowest unemployment rate ever in the history of the country. There are jobs to be had. There are more jobs now than there are people. So now if they come up to Nicole and say 10% cut, Nicole can say, I'll leave. The worst that's going to happen is I'm going to get a raise. Okay? But it used to be that jobs were hard to come by. Actually, it was some of the worst unemployment rates for minority groups. It went from the worst unemployment rates to the lowest unemployment rates just by changing administration. Okay? Let's take a look at this. A 10% pay cut's followed by a 10% pay raise. So let's say Nicole was working for this company. She likes them. It's close. She can walk to work. Whoa, that's handy. That saves a lot of money. But they said we got to do a 10% pay cut. Now, if it's a 10% pay cut, how would you figure out what her new salary is? 0.9 times it. Where'd you get 0.9 from 10? Yeah, it's 10% less than it was. Oh, 10% less than means the 100 minus the 10, doesn't it? So that means multiply by 0.9 because she still gets to keep 90% of it. Okay, so let's do this. 45,000 times 0.9 equals, her new salary is $40,500. Okay, so let's say about 6 years ago it got cut. She kept the job because she liked working, and it was good luck finding a job. New administration. It's had a couple of years, time for new policies to take place. They don't change overnight, but in a couple of years' time, will it over? Things are doing much better. Okay? And they come back and they say, hey, Nicole, we really appreciate the work you do around here. We really want to keep you around. We're going to give you back that 10%. So they give her a 10% raise. Now, what are we going to multiply by this time? 1.1, because it's 10% more than it used to be. Okay. Stop it already. So we're going to take this times 1.1 equals. Nicole sees a bump in her paycheck. And her husband's looking at it and he whips out the phone, whips out the calculator and says, wait a minute, you're not making $45,000. You're making $44,550. How'd that happen? Did they jip her? They gave her back 10%.
Wait, why was that lost?
Please?
Why was that percent lost?
The percent lost because in the previous administration, people were taking pay cuts just to keep their job. I mean, the jobs were leaving the country left and right.
So the 10% decrease, why was it 0.9?
Okay, if it's 10% less than it was going to be, it would be the 100 minus the 10, which is 90, which is 0.9. This is 90%, which is a decimal, is 0.9. Okay, yeah.
Why was it 1.1 instead of 1.0?
Okay, where this 1.1 came from is we had 100% of what she was making, plus here comes your 10% raise, which gives you 110, which is a decimal is 1.1. Good. I'm glad you're asking them now instead of after the quiz Friday. What happened? Why isn't she back up to 55 grand or 45 grand? They gave her back 10%. Yes, sir. Okay, that's right, because the amount after the pay cut is a smaller starting amount now, isn't it? So if you take 10% of that, you're not going to get as much. 10% of a smaller number is not the same as 10% of a bigger number. That's exactly it. This is what is called a shifting reference value. It's very common for people to say, well, 10% off, 10% on, we're going to be back to the same amount. No, you aren't. Because the new value is a smaller starting point. Does that make sense why it's not as big? Now, Nicole may want to go back and say, I know you wanted to give me back the amount, and I'm all excited about that, but what you did only takes me up to $44,550. And I'm sure they'll say, oops, I don't know why. And Nicole probably thinks I do. Okay? But you don't pick on them. You say, another $450, please. And I'll take it back. Does this stuff make sense? It's kind of tricky, isn't it? Especially with the percentage points versus percentages. Okay. So, this next example here is basically that same deal. Okay. Let's see, we got a couple of minutes. See if we can get this finished. Yeah. Okay, one last example, or one last thing to talk about. If you have several percentages, you cannot assume that you can add them together to do an average. What's talked about here is a batter. First half of the season, he's got a .315 batting average. The second half of the season, he's got what? Oh, let's say a .150 batting average. Does that mean you take the 350 plus the 150, add them together, and divide by 2? And the answer is no. What you need to do is maybe in the first half, he got 1 hit on 3 trips to the plate. During the second half, let's say he got 20 hits on 100 trips to the plate. If you want to know the actual percentage for the season, you don't take this 333, which is the first half, and add it to 20 out of 100 is a 200. You don't get this 533 and divide by 2. Because what that does is it says that this 333 from the first half of the season represents as much work as the 200 from the second half. Does it really represent as much work? It doesn't. If you want to get the total, the final percentage, you would need to add these two together, 21 hits out of 103 trips to the plate. For the entire season, it would be 21 divided by 103, which is going to be a 203 batting average. Not very good. If we took the two percentages and add them up, we'd take the 533 divided by 2, which would give a 267 batting average. Is there a difference between a 203 and a 267 batting average? There's a huge difference. Okay? You cannot just take percentages, add them together, and average, because they may not be based on the same number of situations. Does that make sense to everybody? So be real careful of that. Sounds like there's something cool going on out there. I'll see you all on Friday. The quiz will cover 3A and your first budget sheets due, right?